The dust kicked up in lazy swirls as Jake McCready's horse plodded down the main street of Willow Creek, a town that had seen better days even before the drought hit. The wooden storefronts stood like broken teeth against the harsh afternoon sun, their paint peeling and signs creaking in the dry wind. Jake pulled his hat lower over his weathered face, squinting against the glare as he counted the meager coins in his pocket. Coffee, beans, maybe some jerky if the price was right, that's all his money would stretch to cover. He'd been riding alone for 3 years now, ever since Martha died of the fever back in Kansas. The ranch they'd built together felt too empty without her laughter echoing through the rooms, so he'd sold it for whatever he could get and taken to drifting. Work where he could find it, sleep under the stars, and try not to think too much about what might have been. It was a lonely existence, but it suited a man who'd forgotten how to hope for anything better. The general store sat at the end of the street, its windows clouded with dust and age. Jake tied his horse to the hitching post and was about to push through the door when he heard it, a sound so soft he almost missed it over the wind. A whimper, like a wounded animal might make. He paused, listening, and heard it again from the narrow alley between the store and the barber shop. Curious despite himself, Jake walked around the corner and stopped short. Huddled against the wall sat a young woman in what had once been a white dress, now stained with dirt and torn at the hem. Her dark hair hung in tangles around a face so thin it made his chest ache. She couldn't have been more than 20, but her eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd seen too much hardship for her years. "Please," she whispered, looking up at him with desperate eyes. "Do you have any food? Just a crust of bread, anything at all." Jake felt something twist in his gut. He'd seen plenty of hard luck in his travels, but something about this woman, he corrected himself, noting the simple gold band on her finger, struck him deeper than usual. Maybe it was the way she held herself, like she was trying to maintain some dignity even in her desperation. Or maybe it was just that she reminded him of Martha, back when they were both young and the world seemed full of possibilities. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, crouching down to her level. She considered the question as if it required great effort. "Tuesday, I think. Or maybe Monday. A man gave me half an apple." Her voice was barely above a whisper, cracked from thirst. Jake glanced back toward the general store, calculating. His supplies could wait another day or two if needed. "What's your name?" "Sarah Whitman," she said, then quickly corrected herself. "Sarah Bennett now. I was married last month." The past tense in her voice told him everything he needed to know about her husband's current state. Jake had seen enough of life to recognize a widow when he met one, even when she was too fresh in her grief to fully accept it herself. "Well, Mrs. Bennett, how about we get you something proper to eat?" Her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "I couldn't ask you to. I don't have any money to pay you back." "Didn't ask you to pay me back," Jake said simply, extending his hand to help her up. She weighed nothing at all, like a bird with hollow bones. Up close, he could see the purple shadows under her eyes and the way her dress hung loose on her frame. She'd been beautiful once, probably still was under the layers of dust and despair. Inside the general store, the proprietor looked up with the weary expression of a man who'd grown tired of turning away customers who couldn't pay. His demeanor shifted when he saw Jake, recognizing the cut of a man who might actually have coins in his pocket. "Afternoon," the storekeeper said. "Name's Hutchins. What can I do for you?" Jake glanced at Sarah, who was staring at the shelves of food with an intensity that made his heart clench. "The lady needs a meal, and I need supplies. Let's start with some bread, cheese, maybe some of that dried meat you've got behind the counter." While Hutchins gathered the food, Jake studied Sarah's reflection in the window. She was trying so hard to stand straight, to look like she wasn't about to collapse from hunger and exhaustion. Pride, he thought, it was the only thing she had left, and she was clinging to it with both hands. "Thank you," she said quietly as they settled at a small table in the back of the store. Hutchins had reluctantly allowed them to eat there, probably more out of fear that Sarah might faint than any real hospitality. She ate slowly, deliberately, like someone who'd learned not to waste a single crumb. "You want to tell me what happened?" Jake asked, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been made with creek water and optimism. Sarah was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, Her voice was steady but her hands trembled as they held the bread. "Thomas and I came out here from Ohio. We heard there was land to be had, opportunities for people willing to work hard. We bought a claim about 10 miles north of here, near the river." She paused to take another careful bite. "Thomas was going to build us a house, plant crops. We were going to have children, maybe keep some chickens." Jake waited, sensing there was more. The river dried up in July. The crops failed, and then the fever came through. "Thomas." Her voice broke slightly, then steadied. "Thomas died 2 weeks ago. I buried him myself, said what prayers I could remember. Family back home." She shook her head. "My parents died when I was 16. Thomas was all I had." She looked directly at him for the first time, and he saw the steel beneath her fragility. "I know how this looks, a woman alone, begging in the street. But I'm not asking for charity. I'm willing to work for what I need." "What kind of work?" "I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I taught school back in Ohio before I married. I can read and write, do sums." Her chin lifted slightly. "I'm not afraid of hard work." Jake found himself admiring her backbone. It would have been easy for her to give up, to let despair drag her under. Instead, she was fighting, looking for a way forward even when the path seemed impossible to see. "You got anywhere to stay tonight?" The question seemed to embarrass her. "There's an old line shack about a mile from here. The roof leaks, but it's better than nothing." Jake made a decision that surprised him. 3 years of drifting, of avoiding any connection that might remind him of what he'd lost, and here he was about to complicate his simple existence. "I've got a camp set up by the creek, about half a mile south of town. You're welcome to share it for the night. Got an extra bedroll, and it's safer than being alone in some broken-down shack." Sarah studied his face carefully, and he could see her weighing desperation against propriety. Finally, she nodded. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Jake McCready." He stood and gathered the remaining food. "And it's not kindness, it's common sense. A woman alone in this country might as well paint a target on her back." They rode double on Jake's horse, Sarah sitting behind him with her arms carefully positioned to maintain some distance between them. She was quiet during the short ride, but he could feel the tension in her body beginning to ease as they left the dusty streets of Willow Creek behind. His camp was simple but well organized, the habits of a man who'd learned to make do with little. A small fire ring, bedrolls positioned to catch the morning sun, supplies stored in a canvas bag hung from a tree branch to keep them away from critters. Sarah looked around with the eye of someone who understood the value of order in chaos. "You can have the spot by the big rock," Jake said, pointing to where he'd made a natural windbreak. "Water's clean here, and there's soap in my pack if you want to wash up." He busied himself with building up the fire while she disappeared downstream with his spare shirt and a bar of soap. When she returned, her hair was damp and combed back from her face, and wearing his oversized shirt over her patched dress, she looked younger and somehow more fragile than before. They shared a simple meal of beans and bacon as the sun set behind the mesa, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah ate with obvious enjoyment, and some color had returned to her pale cheeks. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Jake poked at the fire with a stick, considering how to answer. "Had a wife once. If something had happened to me and left her alone." He shrugged. "Guess I'd hope someone would do right by her." "What happened to her?" "Fever. Like your husband. 3 years ago now." The words came easier than they used to, though the ache was still there. "Sometimes I think the loneliness might kill me before old age gets the chance, but then I remember that being alone is better than burying another person you love." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Thomas used to say that loving someone was the bravest thing a person could do. That it takes courage to give someone the power to break your heart. "Smart man, your husband." "He was." She wrapped her arms around her knees. "I keep thinking I should feel his spirit or something, some sign that he's watching over me. But there's just nothing. Like he never existed at all." Jake understood that feeling all too well. "The dead don't leave ghosts," he said. "They leave memories, and the things we learned from loving them. That's got to be enough." They sat in silence as the stars came out, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "I can't stay in Willow Creek. There's nothing for me there, and winter's coming. But I don't know where to go or how to get there. Jake had been thinking the same thing. A woman alone, with no money and no family, faced limited and mostly unpleasant options in a place like this. He made another decision that would have shocked the man he'd been 3 years ago. I'm heading south, toward Santa Fe. There's work there, and it's warmer. You could come along if you want, at least until you figure out what's next. Sarah looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You don't even know me. I could be trouble. Could be, Jake agreed. But I don't think so. And even if you were, it might be worth the risk to have some company for a while. She was quiet for so long he thought she might decline, but finally she nodded. I'd like that, thank you. As they settled down for the night, Jake found himself thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning he'd been a lonely drifter planning to buy supplies and move on. Tonight he was traveling companion to a young widow who'd appeared in his life like an answer to a prayer he hadn't known he was praying. Maybe Thomas Bennett had been right about courage and love. Maybe Jake had been running from the possibility of connection for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to care about someone else's well-being. Sarah wasn't Martha, and he wasn't the same man who'd loved and lost 3 years ago. But perhaps there was room in his life for something new, something that honored what he'd lost while still allowing for what might be found. The fire died down to glowing embers, and Jake listened to Sarah's breathing even out as she fell asleep. Tomorrow they would head south together, two wounded souls finding their way toward something that might, with time and patience, begin to resemble hope.